On this episode of Salt Lake Insider, we're talking to the Main Street entrepreneur about starting businesses and how not having money to do so may actually benefit you. On this episode... Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Salt Lake Insider, episode number 4. I'm your host, Dustin Brohm. I am the founder of SearchSaltLake.com and a real estate agent here in Salt Lake. And I am here with Jay Glauser, the Main Street entrepreneur, or
Hello,
one
everybody.
of them, the host of the Main Street Entrepreneur podcast. And they actually have a book coming out. I'll let him explain more about what he's working on, because it's some pretty cool stuff for the business world. We're here in Canyon Rim. It's a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky, so we're outside. So if you hear some weird sounds in the background, it's probably the neighbor mowing his lawn, or it's a car driving by.
It's too nice to be inside, so here we are. Side of my house. Forgive the weeds, don't worry about it.
Yep. We tried this on Friday, and the garbage man kept going by. He went by twice. I think he was just doing that to spite us.
Yeah, that was loud.
So this is really take number 2 of episode number 4. So anyhow, Jay,
Yes.
You are deeply involved in the business world and entrepreneurship, and you guys run a company called My New Enterprise.
Correct.
And then
Correct.
the Main Street Entrepreneur. Tell Salt Lake what you guys do.
Okay. So the quick summary is my father's my business partner, and we've been working together for the last 7 or 8 years now. But his career, he plowed through school, got his PhD in business, started teaching, immediately realized he wanted to put his money where his mouth was, left academia, ran a few successful businesses for a decade or so, came back to academia and realized what I just did is nothing like what's being taught when he reviewed the curriculum. So essentially we wanted to bridge this gap between real world entrepreneurial experience and what real entrepreneurs across America and around the world are doing versus what you learn in a textbook. And you know, to be fair, universities are coming around and have come around the last several years a lot to kind of a true entrepreneurial curriculum. But essentially we set out to say, hey, let's go interview real entrepreneurs all across the country. My dad had been doing it for years, wrote a couple books, but we said, well, let's take my recent skills with multimedia, and I've been into film, and so we set out to combine the two and say, let's interview entrepreneurs across America on film and then use the curriculum to then sell to universities or businesses, organizations, individuals. And so that's what we've been doing for about the last seven years or so, is traveling the country and filming people that start really cool businesses.
So speaking of traveling the country, you guys do a lot of unique things. I mean, marketing is so big in business, as you know. Anyone who's in business knows that. You guys have done some really unique, I'd say over-the-top things, very involved things to get your name out there.
We have some fun.
And to collect these interviews with other successful entrepreneurs. Tell us about, what's been your most favorite thing you've done? Is that even the way you say it, most favorite? What's the best thing that you guys have done, and why?
So easily, hands down, my favorite. We like to, rather than, when we first started, it was little weekend trips, film that guy, go to the city, film that guy, and it wasn't very efficient, and we're only getting 1 or 2 stories on these trips.
Right.
So we decided that every year or two we spend a month or so and go out and just collect content and travel the country. And it was kind of combined with a dream that my dad had to ride his bike across the country, and we thought, how can we intertwine these two things? And so we set out to ride our bicycles from coast to coast across America to interview 100 entrepreneurs in 100 cities across the country and see how they're doing it. Kind of small town America where are no big companies.
Just 100.
Yeah, just 100. Just 100.
It's amazing.
So we did 100, and that's what turned into the book that Dustin was talking about, Main Street Entrepreneur, which is actually out now on Amazon or wherever you get books, Barnes & Noble and all that. And we filmed about 3 dozen of those, interviewed on audio 100 for the book, and the book got picked up through Entrepreneur Media, through Entrepreneur Magazine, and we've been working with them a bit, and it's been a fun ride, really, really fun ride. But riding a bike across the country to collect content was quite an experience.
I bet it was. Tell us what happened. I mean, obviously not everything goes according to plan.
Correct.
You probably ran into some weather, I assume.
Correct. Yes.
Maybe some wacko people along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Tell us
we did.
Tell us some of the crazy stuff that happened biking coast to coast.
it's fascinating that within one country you can see so many cultures. That was one thing that was fun, going from coast to coast. And I mean, the Northwest is very, very different from the hills of Kentucky, that's for sure, but it's all America, but very, very different. So it's really neat to just meet all sorts of different people. But you mentioned weather was one kind of horrific story that I felt like I was going to lose my hands at one point. We took off in the morning and weather was forecasted to be great. We were in Montana, got stuck in a rainstorm, didn't have the rain gear, wasn't prepared. It wasn't supposed to rain, and it definitely did once we got up to this higher altitude. I looked down, was coming down this hill in the rain like 30 miles an hour and couldn't even hold my brakes. My hands were turning purple. That was scary. Long story short, had to call into the RV, said, come get me. Come get me, I'm getting in to warm up. But even more than that, I was okay, all said and done once I warmed up. My dad, one thing I do need to mention, we were in Kentucky, Hazard, Kentucky. He was going up over these railroad tracks. Bike came out from underneath him, slammed down his hip, his head. Thankfully, he was wearing a helmet. But he could barely walk. He was limping around and just refused to stop. So he got back on his bike, and the next 3 days he pretty much rode with one leg. So that's pretty crazy. That
is crazy.
Crazy. So, perseverance, a lesson in perseverance, which is what all these entrepreneurs do. And just don't give up, and sometimes you got to pivot and figure out how else to do it, but you just get the job done.
Well played.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about your dad, Mike Glauser. What you mentioned that he's run a few successful businesses. Is there anything that the people of Salt Lake would be familiar with?
So he got into the frozen dessert business years ago and started a company called Golden Spoon or Golden Swirl Frozen Yogurt.
At Cottonwood Mall?
And in the back, there's the one in Cottonwood Mall, absolutely. And I mean, he has since sold it to a company out of Toronto, I believe. This was years ago, and actually it's been interesting. They just bought it for the wholesale distribution side, kind of let the stores go. They ended up shutting down, and recently franchise rights have popped back up. I'm not positive who's running it now, but they're popping back up, but no affiliation with our family anymore. So
wasn't there Golden Spoon and Golden Swirl, or was that the same company?
Yeah, same company. Well, it was. Okay. So what it was Golden Spoon originally, but when he was trying to franchise and expand, there's a coffee company in California called Golden Spoon, I believe was the story, and so had to do this big kind of name change, and had a big media event and gave away tons of yogurt and said we're now Golden Swirl and all that. So
nice.
That's the shift. So what's pushing out the national franchise. That's
nice. I loved that place at Cottonwood Mall back in the day.
Yeah,
it was right across from Tilt.
You'd go get dropped off all the time. My mom dropped me off. Pocket full of quarters, grab some yogurt.
Oh man, Tilt. Yeah. Love it. So for anyone, jumping back into being a little more serious here, that anyone who's wanting to get into business, wanting to go out on their own, to take their future and their livelihood into their own hands, like you mentioned before, is there any one or two pieces of advice that you'd give them before they get started?
I think number one, you have to absolutely know why you're doing what you're doing, and it cannot be just about the money. We have a whole lesson and a bunch of stuff that we discuss about finding your powerful purpose, and just about every single entrepreneur I've ever interviewed, which is hundreds now, when you ask them why they do it, it's so much more than making money. It's empowering women, or providing for their children, or solving this true need a certain community has. And it's so much more, and the reason that's important is because it's not easy. As you know, we've talked about starting a business is not easy, no matter what kind. Right. And you will run into hurdles and bumps in the road, and if it's just about the money, there's always other ways to go make money in life. And so it needs to be about more than that, because it will help pull you through. And then on the same kind of token about money, I would say stop using money as an excuse. And what I mean is, probably the number one struggle that we hear when I ask people what's your number one struggle with launching this business or this idea that you have, they say, I need venture funding, I need venture capital, if only I had the money to do this. But the interesting thing, again, of all the entrepreneurs we've interviewed, almost none of them went out and got funding. Even bank loans, venture cap angels, none of them. It's crazy that they just, you think in terms of resources rather than money, and you say, okay, here's what I need to get done. And if I don't have the money, how else can I do this? How am I going to figure this out? Flies bugging us. Yep. But yeah, so they just get it done, and it doesn't matter how they figure that out around having capital or not. It's just you just get it done. Stop using money as an excuse, because all these people I've interviewed over the years are the same way. They just don't they don't go get the venture funding. So it's interesting that it's this huge thing, and I think it's because of the business culture we've created, that the Facebooks and the Amazons and the tech companies are this sexy, go get funding, get investors, get a 10x return and an exit strategy.
The social network movie.
Yeah, the social network style thing, where, I mean, I think out of the 28 million, businesses in America, less than 4,000 eventually become large publicly traded companies, and so it's like there's still 27,900,000 plus, 27,900,000 plus businesses that are doing it without that. Right. And you can still make a great living and still provide for yourself, and it doesn't have to be this giant sexy thing. Just go out and do it.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Just having speaking personally, just having the freedom to do what I want on a day-to-day basis is worth all the all the ups and the downs. Absolutely. And maybe a few months where there is no income. It's all worth it just to have that freedom and that lifestyle.
Absolutely.
So talking about not needing funding, and I've heard a lot of successful entrepreneurs say that funding actually makes you soft. It can actually hinder your ability to become successful.
Absolutely.
Because you're not as crafty, you're not as resourceful.
Well, if you have
does anyone come to mind?
If you have it, if you have the money, then it's just, we need this, we'll go out and buy it, Right. Whereas if you don't have it, you're like, how am I going to figure out how to make this work? You're more invested. You're like, I don't have the money, I have to just go out and do this myself. You get creative, you think outside the box. And there's a lot of different ways that people do that, and at some point you do definitely need resources, and sometimes, a lot of time, that is money. But even if you do need a certain amount of money, there are other ways to go out and do that. A couple examples. I tell you, Justin Gold from Justin's brand, Justin's Nut Butters. We interviewed him.
The packets.
Yeah, the little squeeze packs. Yeah, we've been following him for years. Interviewed him in Boulder, Colorado, about 6 or 7 years ago, and he told us the story of how when he gets in the game of making peanut butter at a bigger scale, he has to go out and that calls around, how do you make peanut butter big scale, or on a bigger scale? And he calls companies like, the Jif and whatever that do it, and figures out how the machines that they make it, and have these big 6-figure machines that industrial machines making this peanut butter. He's like, I don't have that, and he's like, but in my kitchen, I make it with a little food processor, it's just a smaller scale. So how can I figure this out? So he went out and found like the oldest, biggest industrial food processor he could find, and bought all these different parts here and there and scrounged together this machine, put it all together, and figured out how to make peanut butter.
Love it.
For a fraction of the cost. And that's what these entrepreneurs that we interview do. All the successful entrepreneurs, part of the differences that truly make the difference, they're scrappy, they figure out how to do it, they don't waste money, even and then even on a bigger scale. One quick story is I've interviewed Dave Neeleman of JetBlue Airlines, and now he's down in Brazil doing Azul Airlines. But he even talked about, he's actually kind of known for being very frugal in the industry, but he's got billion-dollar companies, but he still says, I take the same press board desk as anyone else. It's like, I don't, just because you have the money doesn't mean you need to spend it. Don't go out, get funding. Don't go out and buy a big new company car. Don't go out and buy a big new office when your basement will do, or your garage will do. It's kind of the cliche story. Start out of your garage, classic entrepreneur.
Right.
Save money, get scrappy. Think, what do you need? Absolutely need at a minimum to, get that outcome that you're looking for, and then just go do it.
Love it. One question, and then we'll talk about, how do people find you and get in touch with you guys and your company, and consume your awesome content. So there's so many, because of the internet, you can do business anywhere. Why Salt Lake City?
Salt Lake for me is just because it's home. Salt Lake is a great place to do business. But for me personally, it's because this is home. I was raised here, grew up here, and granted, I have traveled a ton. When I was out of high school, I'm like, when I moved around, I'm like, at least I'm going to get out of the city and see what else is out there. And I spent, 8 years or so of my life traveling. I've been to 47 of the 50 states, and it kind of made me realize, wow, like, I'm going back to Salt Lake. Like, this place is actually really, really awesome. And so it's just home for me, and I love it. And with technology affecting jobs, positive and negative, but people now can also figure out how to make a living from anywhere, and so I get to just stay right here and do it.
Love it. Yeah, my wife and I, we travel quite a bit as well, and it's funny. It's given us the perspective of how great Salt Lake City really is.
Absolutely.
In high school, you know, I was kind of like you. I was like, oh, I need to get out of here. Salt Lake's so lame. There's nothing to do.
It's a bubble. Got to get out of this bubble.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you start traveling around the country, and even though there's some amazing cities out there, it made me appreciate Salt Lake.
Absolutely.
I
needed to get back in the bubble. Yeah.
People complain about the traffic in Salt Lake, and rush hour can suck sometimes, but that's it. I mean, our traffic is so non-existent compared to Atlanta, Dallas, LA.
It's amazing.
Seattle.
Quick story on that, actually. It's a funny one. So, you know, we were big advocates of doing what you love wherever you want to live. And anyways, two of my favorite entrepreneurs, Benny and Julie Benson, and we've got stories like this on websites, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they moved to LA. They're biogas engineers, basically. They moved to LA, got jobs, you know, out of school, landed these great jobs. And he, you know, Benny tells us the story. He's like, I was so excited and wanted to be professional, wanted to make sure I was early. He's like, I left to go to work 2 hours early. Because like I showed up 15 minutes late, and that was my introduction to traffic in LA, you know. And so they just ended up hating the city, hating the noise of it, you know, the concrete jungle. They found Sisters, Oregon, just kind of traveling around, and they fell in love with the place. And 10 days later, they moved their family up there.
Nice.
And then they figured out how to make a living up there. So
that's cool.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
Very cool. So Jay,
yes,
how do people how do they find your content? How do they get in touch with you and your company, especially if they want to learn how to start their own business and do it the right way, the scrappy way? How do they find you?
Yeah, so essentially this whole push we've been doing the last few years is Main Street Entrepreneur. It's our Main Street movement, and you can go to themainstreetentrepreneur.com. For all sorts of resources there. You can go to YouTube and find the Main Street Entrepreneur YouTube channel, and we've just put up tons of stories, all the entrepreneurs that we filmed from the bike ride, and a lot since then. We put up business tips, and it's all free. And then we do have an actual really robust training program that's got links, you know, through the website if you're really wanting to, that we sell, that you can sign up for. And if you email me, jay@themainstreetentrepreneur.com, and I'll hook you up with a big fat discount.
Nice, sweet, just throwing money away.
Yeah, there you go.
Just giving it out.
But we've got, if that's not for you, tons of free content. So themainstreetentrepreneur.com. I try and put out stuff regularly, weekly. Also Instagram, The Main Street Entrepreneur.
And your book is out now.
The book is out now.
And the podcast is available on iTunes,
is out
Stitcher,
now.
and all that.
Yep, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And actually, a documentary is in the works.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Yeah. Right on. Jay, thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I think we could talk for hours just about all your experiences with the bike tour and all those small companies you met with, but let's just call it a day.
No, I think so. We've probably gone too long already.
Right on.
Okay.
Hey, thanks so much.
For having me. Thanks, everybody.
Man. This has been Salt Lake Insider, episode number 4. Thanks for tuning in. Ladies truck.
Yeah, right at the exit.